Hunting or Bust by Master Atlan in Chapter 43, and Spinning World Part 1. That's how we started, and to understand how we got from there to here, we have to look back on what brought us here. Well, I mean, technically, you guys have a pretty good idea of that already. Stealing from Crime Lord, getting caught, Osman with the second chances, initiation, get on with it. Right, sorry. Anyway, I guess it started for me, hunting. The nasty gruel splashed on the tray and kicked up some gross chunks and bits. Naruto stared down at his unappetizing meal as his ears flattened across his head. He looked up at the server. Do you guys need any help back there? 'Cause I'm pretty mean with spices and condiments. The sloth's fauna slowly looked up and stared at Naruto. She didn't move for several seconds before going back to scooping out the gunk that was being fed to the freedom fighters. Naruto rolled his eyes and just left the line, letting the next poor soul get the most unappetizing crab in the world. 15 years old, and he was certain he could make any of their servings twice as good with minimal effort. He walked along the tables, hearing other White Fang members talk joyfully and laugh while their slop was pushed aside for later. Naruto wished he could join in on the laughter, but he couldn't find it in himself. He devoured the gruel as fast as he could, shoveling it down before dropping his tray off by the exit. He headed down the corridor and back to the barracks. He'd rather spend his time resting and waiting for whatever task he had to do next. The less time he spent actively helping the White Fang cause havoc to the innocent, the better. Well, if it isn't my favorite sleeping rookie. Oh, great. All the outposts they get moved to across Remnant, and that tool came to the same one as him. Naruto looked back and saw the same cocky grin he had come to detest since joining this damn group. The taller, older man was Mizuki, a white-haired tiger fauna well over 10 years old, who had taken special interest in Naruto since he arrived almost 2 years ago. Where you going, kiddo? Off for a little snooze before our next assignment? Yeah, actually, that's exactly it. Naruto didn't know why he let the irritation bleed through into his voice. It only served to satisfy the bastard's attempt to know him. Now, if you don't mind, what's your hurry? Mizuki quickly stepped around him to stop him from going anywhere. The tiger crossed his arms, attempting to show off his larger arms as he sneered at the fox. If you got time to just lie around, why don't you and I head to the grounds, get in some training? This guy was pathetic. When Naruto first joined the White Fang, Danzo decided to test his skills by putting him in a training group with some older members. He faced off against Mizuki first, and with some fast movement, Naruto knocked him down pretty fast. Mizuki had power, but Naruto had been training with his father, and in comparison, Mizuki stood like a statue when he fought. Unfortunately, from that moment on, he had got himself a firm spot on the tiger's shit list. No, Naruto growled as he attempted to squeeze by him. Now, get out of my... Mizuki's hand slammed on the wall by Naruto's head as the white tiger seethed in anger. He slowly turned to glare at the fox, his movement looking extremely disjointed and unnatural as he faced him. Naruto's expression didn't change at all as he just stared at the taller man down. Mizuki glared at him. Don't think you can just ignore me. Just because you beat me once doesn't make you better than me. That was a sparring match 2 years ago. Get over it. Naruto drawled, fed up with Mizuki's pride and insecurity. See, here's what I don't get. You can handle all of the others so well in training and spars, but when it comes to the actual raids, you're utter shit. Mizuki noted and smiled when he saw Naruto's eyes narrow. And I noticed how often you get caught up by the heads. That must make you pretty special too, am I right? What are you, some kind of scout for the leaders, to see who's lieutenant material or not? No, if he was anything special, he'd have power and some ability to help his mother. Mizuki, back off. Naruto was fed up with his conversation. I'm sick of talking about it. And I'm just getting started. Mizuki narrowed his eyes. So you better... They looked over to see another White Fang member. This one still wearing the mask as she looked at them. There's been a summons. He's been called over. Tell them to wait, Mizuki petulantly growled. I'm not done talking with him yet. She seemed intimidated by his anger before continuing. It was from the leader meeting. He's supposed to go over ASAP. Mizuki's body eased just a fraction before he looked back down at Naruto. His glare intensified before he scoffed. And the evidence stacks up. He turned, making sure to hit Naruto with his shoulder on the move as he continued down the hall. They're still meeting, but you're supposed to... I know. He didn't wait for her to finish as he walked and started making his way to the meeting. He fished around his pocket before pulling out the grim mask that had been given to him when he joined. The rules were that you could take it off during lunch and whenever you weren't on assignment, but you needed it on during missions, training, or around the leaders. He hated this stupid mask. He hated looking like a monster and scaring people. The look on people's faces during those raids when they watched him with such fear and horror, they would haunt him for the rest of his life. But he was still a part of this, and the mask was part of the job too. He attached it over his nose and walked into the waiting room outside of the council room. Whenever he was called in these places, these places were empty, rows of seats back to back, but there was just one other person sitting here this time. It looked like a girl, long black hair, and what looked like feline ears on her head, but she was wearing the same uniform and grim mask as so he couldn't get a look at her. He walked around and sat down, sitting in the row faced away from her as he waited. The room was uncomfortably quiet, and the girl seemed to be occupying her time by reading or something that just seemed boring. Hey, any idea how much longer they'll... No, she was quick and curt with her answer. Naruto slumped in his chair after her sharp response. They sat in silence before he tried striking up a conversation. So, what were you called in for? She raised her book up and focused on the tome to block him out. Sourpuss. Thankfully, the tension came to an end when they heard the doors open. Naruto and the girl stood up as they heard several pairs of footsteps come out of the meeting room. Advisors, tacticians, and leaders. The first person Naruto saw exit the room was Adam. Naruto instinctively stepped back when he saw the bull-headed fawn make his way out. Adam Taurus was the head Naruto had the least knowledge and interest with. He didn't think a lot about the people that joined the group, but something about that guy was just unnerving. The rumors about his ferocity, his skill. He was probably the only guy Naruto knew in the entire organization that kept his mask on at all times as a preference. That moody book girl stood up and followed him out as the rest of the meeting people started flooding out. People called together to plan future attacks and raids. Leaders and lieutenants, and among them Danzo. Naruto was thankful for once he was wearing the mask, because otherwise his hateful glare would be clear as day. Danzo stopped to look back at him, and Naruto realized he must have sensed his stare. He panicked as the old weasel stared back for a good few seconds, the whiskered boy feeling his palms sweat before he finally started to move again. He sighed in relief when he was gone, and finally she came out. Long red hair with the eyes hidden by her grim mask. His mother. He didn't call out or smile or react when he saw her, but she spared him a look and motioned for him to follow. They walked around the corner and out of sight before it was just the two of them. A small smile finally came over his face. Thanks for calling. I'm glad you came. They shared a quick hug before separating. They didn't do this kind of stuff in the presence of other members of the White Fang. Danzo had made it clear the day that he joined that he was just a member of the White Fang now, and he couldn't socialize with his mother so easily anymore. He seemed to be under the idea that people wouldn't follow or listen to her if they knew her son was born from a human father. Other people who joined could have a split family like that, but she was expected to be pure fondness, and if they ever knew her lover was human, then she'd lose that ability to command them. Danzo was having none of that, so from that day on, she would be referred to as ma'am, and he was Uzumaki. So they met in secret after council gathering like that. She wanted to make sure he got back from his missions all right, while he made sure nothing bad happened to her. Even if they couldn't meet regularly, that didn't mean it was going to stop them from being mother and son. What was that meeting about? The usual. She spoke without any energy or feeling in her voice. She hadn't spoken with such mirth at all in the last 2 years. Attack positions, raid locations, and new rallies for bringing in recruits. I've got to head back to the mainland soon. Oh, Naruto nodded. All right, I'll put in a request for transfer. You can't. Kushina shook her head. It won't be processed this time. What? He was confused by her statement. What are you talking about, Danzo? She stated like a fact. He's not letting you follow me. You're staying at this base indefinitely. What? He quietly growled out, just finding it in himself not to yell at the top of his lungs. He's taken notice of the field reports about you. Kushina lowered her head. Antisocial, unresponsive, slackening training, slow during missions, and problems with authority. You're basically everything he doesn't want from a soldier in his army. Naruto grit his teeth. You have to convince him. I can't. She looked aside. I just can't. She looked petrified, talking about the subject before looking back at him. Maybe you can try harder, work with people before better on missions, and try to find some good intentions in what they're trying to achieve. He stared at her in disbelief. Mom, you know I can't. Her shoulders lowered. Then fake it. The bluntness in her voice was not lost on him, as she seemed to realize what she said. I have to get going. I'll pull some strings, see if I can get back to see you soon. She walked to the corner and stopped before looking back at him. I love you. She left and Naruto was left standing in the hall by himself. 2 years. 2 years had changed them a lot. 2 years they had been here and he hadn't seen his mother's eyes during that whole time. He could barely remember what they looked like now. Hunting. The target came popping up from the ground. He slashed it in an instant. Two more sprung up. He slashed the closest one apart and firing a fiery shotgun blast at the other. One came bouncing down from the tree, and he threw his sword, watching it turn it in an arc and stabbed through the center, pinning it to the ground ahead of him. Another came flying down, and he aimed his hand, watching the crystal he copied flying off his fingers, and littered the target before snatching his sword again. The last targets of the course were cut apart swiftly before he crossed the line and finished with a swing of his sword. He expertly swung his katana around before sliding it into his sheath. Nice, very nice, Gurren applauded as she walked to his side with a stopwatch in hand. You're just a few seconds shy of Reika's best time. Indira still has the record, the blue-haired ex-assassin shrugged. But when you basically bomb the training course, you take that time with a grain of salt, so you're doing great. I knew it. Sasuke couldn't help the smug smile coming over his face as he surveyed his course run. Just a little more practice and I'll be better than the rest of you. Okay, kid, don't get ahead of yourself. She smiled with amusement at his satisfaction. You've still got a ways to go before. Gurren paused as she quickly realized that she had to stare Sasuke in the eye to dress him instead of looking down like she had for so long. Did you get taller? Yeah, he nodded and started heading back to the camp. It's part of me growing up, puberty and everything, and apparently you're becoming more of a smartass. Gurren grumbled as she followed behind. You were barely tolerable as you were. Sasuke enjoyed the laugh before stopping and looking back at the old woman. Do you think you can convince him to let me join now? Gurren just looked at him silently before sighing. Sasuke, I don't know. She waved off his question as she passed him. You know that isn't my decision to make, it's his. But you were closer to him than anyone. Sasuke persisted. You saw how fast I was, how much more skilled I am. I kill and hunt more Grimm than any of you. Yeah, but killing Grimm and fighting the White Fang are two different things. Gurren pointed out as she made it clear she had no say in the matter. Plus, we don't know if you're ready yet. If it's a matter of maturity, then your argument is pretty invalid. When you've got someone like Deidara, Sasuke said irritably, he's more hot-headed and unpredictable than anyone. I know. She knew there was no point in arguing there. When he's right, he's right. But Deidara's already used to dirty fights and situations like this. It's about killing, isn't it? Gurren sighed before turning to see the scowl that twisted young Uchiha's eyes. Ever doubt his ability to fight and join them in battle, and it was sure to piss him off. As she spoke, he just wants to make sure that you're ready for what happens out there. Yeah, well, it's hard to get ready for something no one is willing to help me prepare for. There's not a whole lot of ways to prepare for it. Well, don't you think someone who fights grim, mindless beasts that exist to kill us might fare well against people waving around weapons without any experience? I'm not saying fighting them is harder than fighting grim, but it's different to fight other people, taking their lives. Yeah, but you're used to it. You've killed people since I was younger. Yes. If she was sensitive about the topic he brought up, then she didn't bother showing it. I did a lot of stuff to survive while I was growing up, and killing was apparently something I was particularly good at. Are you going to tell me killing people isn't easy? It isn't easy. It's not particularly hard either, Gurren groaned, annoyed that she had to have this conversation with him. It just happens. One moment you're seeing someone who has lived a whole life filled with things they've done and possibilities of the future, and then you end it, and something happens. Maybe you feel empty, maybe you feel thrilled, maybe you feel nothing at all, but something changes. Gurren continued down the route. It always does. Sasuke watched her silently before mulling over what she said. His thoughts went back to the first time that they met the White Fang 3 years ago when he and Itachi were still making ends meet by bounty hunting. It was shocking to realize it had been 3 years since this group had started, and yet he still remembers that day so vividly. Itachi did seem different after he killed those 2 White Fang members. Before he looked lost and preoccupied. It took a bit before Itachi was properly responding again, and around the time he made a decision to fight back against these terrorists, to make the Uchiha a fighting force again, to make this, they arrived back at their camp to see an open field filled with dozens of tents. Nearly 100 people were out there and around moving supplies, checking in with each other, or just enjoying a meal before the next training seminar with Reika. Sasuke and Gurren were greeted on the way to the main tent, and some saying hello while others merely waved. They finally reached the center tent and saw Itachi and Deidara among a dozen others pointing out locations on city and road maps. There were boards covered with location markers of where the White Fang had struck before, attempting to find some kind of pattern or central point to predict their next move, and photos taken of White Fang during battles, raids, or just surveillance, trying to identify key players, figureheads, or leader locations over the map. The red-haired bull had a lot of strings and connections steaming from his photo. The Uchiha were a much smaller group than the terrorist organization they were fighting. It would be suicide to charge the White Fang with all their members as some kind of last stand, so they had to be smarter, plan attacks and guerrilla tactics to win, and that's how they were able to last so long. Gurren and Sasuke stopped outside the tent and waited for the meeting to end. After a long few minutes, people started to walk out. The two walked in and were greeted by the boisterous bomber. Hey, look, who's back from training? How'd it go, short stuff? I'm taller than you, Sasuke responded without missing a beat and ticked Deidara off. I finished it fast, just like always. Bet you didn't beat my time. Yours barely counts, Gurren added and faced Itachi. Have you all drawn up another plan? Something like that. Itachi nodded as he looked down at the papers on the table. We're weighing our options. Okay, hey, talk to Sasuke. What? The brothers are talking. And she turned the blonde man on his feet and forced him out of the tent with her. Let's give them some space. Wait, what the? Let's see if you can actually run the course like a fighter and not a cheater. The two brothers were left alone as the assassin led the bomber away. Itachi chuckled before turning to Sasuke. So, how did the course go, really? As well as it usually is, and faster too, Sasuke answered while walking around the tent to see what they had. Over the board of people affiliated with the White Fang was a note saying Red Death, whoever that person really was. If they were taken out, then that might have a real effect on the organization's inner workings. Still don't know why you make me run those courses when you know how fast I finish them. Just to get as much improvement as possible, Itachi answered as he continued over the maps. There's always room to grow, but you only grow so much when confined like this. Sasuke wanted to respond like that, but he knew it wouldn't do much to help his case if he acted petulantly. The younger brother just stepped up to the table and looked over the map laid across it. Anything new? More STC location ransacked. Mining areas and other locations using cheap honest labor were bombed after evacuation. The usual. Itachi reached out and poked a red marker on the map. Except for this instant. What happened there? Fatalities? So, Sasuke questioned, there've been a lot of fatalities over all these locations. Sometimes they were on purpose or they were the casualties from a violent attack. What makes this different? So far, the White Fang was involved with executions of people directly involved with any kind of honest mistreatment, but this one, he stared down at the marked location intently. Everyone there that wasn't honest was killed, and there were no more incidents like that since then. Sasuke looked down and narrowed his eyes. So either that was a mistake or something else. Sasuke looked up again and before walking around to face his brother. Then you'll need all the help you can get. Itachi sighed. Sasuke, we talked about this, and we'll keep talking about it until I'm out there with you and everyone else. Sasuke stubbornly continued. What do I have to do? Sasuke, it's because I'm not ready. Itachi stated evenly before facing his brother directly. I don't know if I'm ready to send you out into this fight with the possibility that you might not make it back. I live with that same anxiety when I see you and the others head out to fight, and when I see who didn't make it back, I'm angry because I feel like I could have done something to help if I was there. Itachi grabbed his shoulder. Sasuke, don't be so eager to head out and fight that fight. Your time will come. Believe me. Sasuke didn't convince him. He was angry that he failed to make Itachi see his point, but relented when his brother asked to be patient. His time would come, and with the number of White Fang organizing and gaining steam, that time was fast approaching. Hunting. Naruto felt the wind kick up from the ocean, hitting his eyes and tickling his ears. A strange, pleasant sensation while stranded here on a remote island with an organization of terrorists. With his short blade secured to his hip and the katana on his back, he had made it out to the training course with the rest of the group. He was carrying his personal weapon while some of the others were carrying the traditional pistol and sword. Probably another reason so many people weren't happy to work with him, because he had equipment they didn't. He had the short blade his father had given him, but this katana was a gift. from Danzo, similar to the Kodachi, with a compartment for arrows and a hook at the end to be connected with a wire. Probably that weasel's way of welcoming him into the White Bang. Work with us and there will be rewards. Don't really need to be elaborated upon. Soldiers! They stood at attention as if they were actually members of an army and not a terrorist organization. Listen up! We'll be running the obstacle course once again. This will be a test of your speed, agility, reflexes, maneuverability, and of course your collaborative skill with your fellow soldiers. Okay, time to see if he could improve the report. Better training course and more social cooperation with fellow members. If he could improve, he might be able to get reassigned with his mother again. Group 1, get set at that line. Group 2, back up. He moved with the rest of his group to the start line and prepared for the obstacle course. He fixed the sheaths and pack around his waist before he was ready to go. He looked back at the two other members he was paired with, but he noticed their glares back at him before quickly turning away again. Their eyes were hidden behind their mask, but he could feel something akin to intent. He looked over his shoulder. He saw Misaki standing by the sidelines with a stare on his face. He waved him. Begin! It started and they were off down the course. The first obstacle was Tyrone having to lift their legs up to get from one point to the next. And at the end of the grounded tires were the ones hanging from the ropes. Rows of them together to see how far an individual could dive through them in a hurry. Naruto brought up the back of the group as they maneuvered through the course. They were keeping a good distance between each other while jumping. The front of their team dove through the rings first and rolled out on the other side. The second one followed, catching their foot at the end but still making it. Naruto dove through. The tires swerved while he was diving through them, and he got caught in the obstacle. He heard laughter more prominently from the other two he was grouped with, while he struggled to work his way out of his trap. After straightening out and crawling through, he dropped to the ground to see the others in his group waiting for him. Naruto glared with spite behind his mask, but picked himself up to continue towards the walled-off area. Cutout of soldiers were cut quickly. The spotlights were avoided. When the silhouette of a hunter popped up, he ran the other way. Everything else could be handled, but huntsmen and huntresses were a death sentence. There was a steep slope they had to climb to reach a very large wall with a platform for them to continue on. It was nearly impossible to climb by yourself. The surface too smooth and too high to grab, so it was up to groups to work together to scale it. Okay, come on, one of them yelled to him. Help me throw him up. Naruto quickly came over and hooked hands with the other fondness as one came running up and planted his foot in their hold. They tossed him up with as much force as they could muster, and he caught hold of the edge before climbing up. Give me your hand. Naruto kneeled down while cupping his hands together while the other guy came charging up and kicked up his hands. So the first guy grabbed his hand and pulled him up as Naruto stepped back. Okay, give me your hand. I'm next. The two just looked down at him before scoffing and running out of sight. Hey! Naruto yelled as he lost sight while they continued down the course. Where the hell are you going? They abandoned him. What the hell? What was the instructor going to say if they finished without him? Naruto growled before he stepped back and looked at the wall again. He clicked his teeth, pulling out the short blade and tying a wire around its hook. He slid it down his hand and started spinning the blade as fast as he could before spiking it upwards, watching the sword embed itself into the stone. With a deep breath, Naruto charged forward and ran up the wall as much as he could before climbing the wire. He climbed as fast as he could when he saw his blade start to slip out of the incision, but he grabbed the edge of the peak just as it fell out. He climbed up and pulled his blade back as he desperately ran down the corridor to finish. He might be last, but he was going to make those bricks pay for ditching him. He came to the end of the corridor and saw them climbing the net. He had to get down with his group. Naruto was tackled off the edge with a member of the group, and they went tumbling down the net and hit the ground hard. They separated as Naruto caught his breath before he got fed up. He clambered to his feet and tackled his assailant to the ground and yelled, "What's your problem, asshole? Get off me, man!" What the hell were you two doing? Uzumaki! The instructor came running over to the end of the course, so with a few other soldiers followed behind. What the hell do you think you're doing? Naruto threw his teammate down before pointing between them both. They were sabotaging me. They kicked the tires and left me at the wall and tackled me off the goddamn net. That's not true. The other conspirator climbed down the net and defended himself. This guy is crazy. He yelled at us when he screamed when he screwed up with the tires, and he said he could handle the climb himself. Bullshit! Not cut himself off and yelled, "Stop lying! Enough, all of you!" The instructor yelled. The instructor bellowed as he shook his head. "I don't know who's lying or telling the truth, but it's obvious you can't work together. So how about a day cleaning the base tomorrow? Does that sound better?" Nato scowled forward, and there was a mumbling between all of them before the instructor stormed off with the other group while the other group followed behind him. "We're going back to runs. Everyone get back in line." The two traders helped each other up and went back with the others, but Naruto noticed the turn of their lips as they smirked. He growled and pulled the mask off his face before walking around the course and noticed Mizuki one more time. The white tiger was chuckling and waved goodbye, walking out of sight. It looked like trying harder wasn't going to do much to help when he had a target on his back. Hunting. "Sasuke, can you help us? We could use an extra hand." He quickly went over to help unload the camp supplies from their supply truck. He grabbed a crate of perishables, grunting at their considerable weight before dropping them over with the others. He looked over at the campsite and saw there were still some people missing. "Are they not back from the raid yet? It's been 2 days. Have some hope, kid." A female voice comforted him. "It's Itachi. Mr. Itachi is in the raid team this time, so you know they're in safe hands." Right, his brother, Reika, and Deidara were on the team as well, with at least a dozen other fighters they had trained as well. "I think that's them." Sasuke quickly jumped to his feet as a small crowd started making their way towards the same direction. He slipped his way through the dense crowd and made it to the front to see several trucks and vans stopped by the camp. Itachi came out of one of them, and he immediately felt the sense of relief to see his big brother was okay. Deidara, Reika, and several others came out as well, but it wasn't as large as the group they left with, and they knew what that meant. Itachi sighed and stepped forward to get their attention. "We lost several of our people. They died holding off the White Fang and saving others from being executed in their fanatical effort to make humans suffer. They did not die for nothing, and not just because they passed in the line of duty, but because they helped strengthen ours." The van doors opened and they pulled out several White Fang members to stumble to the ground. Men and women, all with varying features and no masks. The crowd started loudly demanding questions as Itachi pointed down at their hostages. "These people have information on the White Fang, their ranks, their plans, their locations. They are a wealth of information, and we can use it to prepare for the future. Gurren." The blue-haired woman stepped out of the crowd, and he looked at her with sincerity. "We'll need your help with the interrogation." And she nodded as he looked out over the crowd and raised his fist. "This is another step to our victory. Yeah!" Sasuke cheered and felt a smile come to his face. They had to collect information from word of mouth and unreliable sources, sometimes getting the wrong locations or arriving too late to make a difference. But with information directly from the source, and things were turning up in their favor. Hunting. Naruto looked down at his slob with vacant eyes as his spoon swirled the nasty gunk around. His table was empty. People either avoided him because of the rumors or because Mizuki had convinced them to. It had been about a week since the obstacle course incident, and things hadn't gotten any better. Mizuki was manipulating those around him. Other members who shared Mizuki's opinion on Naruto or just plain didn't like him, and they were all out to make him look bad. During training, they messed with his equipment before the exercises. They made him come off as a loner and completely unable to work with others. They started fighting to make him look volatile, and when he tried to explain himself, they argued otherwise and outnumbered him. Mizuki was toying with him. The pitiful bastard was getting back at him for all the times he insulted the tiger's pride. If he wasn't so full of himself, then maybe he could take defeat like a normal person, but that didn't seem likely. Naruto reached into his pocket and pulled out his mask, turned it over in his hand as he examined him, and nowhere in the human world was he accepted, and now it seemed even Faunus didn't take kindly to him. So what did that make him? The whole cafeteria suddenly went silent aside from a few whispers. Naruto didn't bother seeing what all the fuss was about. There was a settling across the table from him, and he realized some sap decided to risk it because there wasn't any more space. Naruto looked up but froze when he saw the red hair and grim mask sitting across from him. Adam Taurus rested his blade and sheath beside him as he started digging into his food. He didn't seem to mind the bland taste of the meal as he shoved it down in silence. Naruto wasn't sure Adam was aware he was sitting across from him or even that he existed, but everyone else in the mess hall had, staring at the scene in confusion and awe. Naruto decided to leave before. "And who are you?" Adam spoke and decided to address him, speaking in a rough and gravelly voice. Naruto didn't expect to hear from the frightening man. His legs froze and he stayed standing in one spot before he finally gave in and sat at the table. "I'm Naruto." He grunted, merely acknowledging that he heard him and not actually interested in what he said. The bull looked up at him for a moment before going back to his meal. "You're her son, aren't you?" Naruto's blood went cold and he looked around to see if anyone in the crowd had heard him say that. There are a lot of foxes in the White Fang, but you look like her. It can't be a coincidence. Was he going to blow it right here after all that work? Or like she and I? Adam offhandedly mentioned. The fox's stomach twisted at the thought that this man and his mother were similar in any way. We're both Danzo's puppets, but after she ran away, I was taken in and trained by his loyal to be his loyal soldier. The results were phenomenal, even if the process and training were torturous, and he planned for the possibility that we may take action in return. I suppose I have to praise his preparation for placing defense mechanisms in us like that. He did what? And he picked us because of our hatred for humans, but apparently that's not a trait that stuck with her. She raises arguments, suggests ways we can finish our task and avoid human casualties. This constant opposition against him has infuriated him beyond belief. He didn't want someone to argue and raise points against him. He wanted another tool. Adam ate another spoonful. Danzo is seriously considering retraining her, and I can attest to how unpleasant an experience that can be. No. So what about you? The bull got to the meat of his inquiry and looked back up at Naruto. Do you share our cause, or are you dragging your feet in an attempt to slow our revolution down? Naruto couldn't find his word while facing this man. He just knew one failed check, one failed promise, one lie, and in an instant he would lose his head. Is that why you haven't fought back against the people tormenting you? Adam raised the spoon. I thought I would see how you react to that kind of harassment, so asked the tiger to push you, humiliate you, isolate you, and I have to say, I'm disappointed with your response. He asked Mizuki to do this as a test. You are being mistreated, Adam grumbled, toyed with, used as a joke. So are you just going to take it? Sit there with all of them, see you as just a fool, as less? Adam's voice got lower and lower before his attention focused on the blonde fox. You want to stay with your mother, right? What are you going to do? This bastard, he was playing them, putting him in a situation just like with humans and fondness. If Naruto wanted this to stop, he would have to make it stop. But if he did, he'd be doing the same thing as the White Fang. I'll stop them, Naruto muttered. I'll convince them. It won't work. Adam interrupted before a mocking smirk came over his face. You and her still have quite a ways to go, it seems. There has to be another way, Naruto said almost desperately before looking at him. I can find another way. Let me tell you a cold, sad truth, kid. That's how he saw him as just a kid. Action speaks louder than words. You can try to make friends, you can try to joke, you can try to convince them who you are, but they won't care because they already made a decision and they won't ever change that choice with just the words they hear. Adam's hand clenched his utensil until it bent in his hand. But action, the choice you make and the result it creates, that will stick forever. Adam looked up at him. So then let me ask you again, what are you going to do? Uzumaki! He slowly looked back to see Mizuki and the two guides from his stable group step out from the crowd. The White Tiger was nervous being in Adam's vicinity as well, but he powered through to call him out. What the hell do you think you're doing? You got some real nerves to think you can just sit there like that? Even though what's good for you, you'll walk and let Mr. Adam enjoy his meal. Naruto was still so affected by Adam's words to respond to the tiger's threat and just grabbed his tray. He stood up, prepared to walk out before looking down to see his mask still on the table. What did that make him? His tray tipped over and spilled the food over Mizuki's pants. What the fuck? He swung the tray across Mizuki's face, brought it back across to strike another of his lackeys before they could react. He dropped the tray and tackled the third one into the table as the crowd of people shuffled back before they were caught in the fight. Naruto pinned him to the table and started throwing punches down as fast as he could, as his victim could only raise his arm to try and defend himself. Naruto felt one of his other tormentors lock him around the shoulder in an effort to restrain him, but Naruto approved his pragmatism, kicking him off the table and forcing his captor to stumble back. They fell back against the table and Naruto twisted around, slamming his elbow into the grappler's ribs hard enough for the hold around him to weaken. The whiskered faunus yelled as he broke away from his captor and started punching him in the sternum. A few hits later and he had rendered his tormentor into a coughing, gagging mess that cradled his chest, but before he could do anything else, he stepped back as a pair of claws slashed his sleeve and drew blood. Naruto stumbled back to see Mizuki had extended his claws as the angry tiger snarled. He lunged at Naruto and started waving his hands around as quickly as possible while Naruto avoided. The blonde ducked beneath one arm and slammed his elbow into Mizuki's ribs in passing before coming up behind him, but the tiger just threw a mule kick in Naruto's guard and sent him stumbling back. Unlike the other guy who was still in training, Mizuki already had his aura activated, but Naruto didn't care about that. He ignored the stinging going up his arms as he clenched his fists. Mizuku dashed forward and started swinging his arms in wide arcs to catch Naruto with his sharp claws. Naruto blocked his forearm before he could make a full swing and jabbed his fist out to catch Mizuki's nose. He kept ducking and leaning out of the way from the tiger's attack as he threw a punch when he could, but it didn't seem to do much while Mizuki's aura persisted. The white-haired man brought his arm across and Naruto put his whole weight into blocking the swing, but he suddenly felt himself get pushed back as Mizuki pressed forward and forced Naruto back. Mizuki knocked Naruto back on the table and grabbed his head before slamming it down on the tabletop repeatedly. Naruto's eyes swam in his head before Mizuki grabbed his collar and dragged him over the table. He slid him across it before letting go and watching Naruto slide over plates and trays and utensils. He slid to a stop. Naruto pushed himself up on his hands and knees. There was a ringing in his ears as he looked up and saw Mizuki sprinting towards him. His vision was blurred for a moment as Naruto pulled himself off the table and faced the charging tiger. He waited for the last moment, the moment when Mizuki pulled his hand back, ready to slash his eyes out and couldn't do anything else. Naruto yelled and jumped forward with a drop kick and knocking Mizuki's legs out from under him. As the white-haired man tumbled over, he tried to pick himself up, but Naruto immediately pounced and pinned him to the floor. The ivory-haired man yelled and cursed in anger before his head was lifted up and slammed into the tiles. It happened again and again. Naruto lifted the tiger's head before bashing his nose back into the floor or smacking his temple on a chair. It took a few times before Mizuki was actually being affected by the attacks, but his aura started to dip and he became groggy. Naruto turned him over as he was facing him before he started striking Mizuki across the face. His fists met flesh over and over and over. The once prideful tiger reduced to a terrified mess beneath him as he did what he could to protect himself. His hands reached out, ripping Naruto's cheek and drawing blood as the blunt continued striking. Soon enough, Mizuki's body was covered in a white light that quickly disappeared as his aura finally vanished. The fist kept falling and blood coated Naruto's face. Stop! Mizuki pleaded with his teeth covering it in blood and his eyes swollen. Stop! Say it! I'm sorry, Mizuki yelled as the fist finally stopped and covered his face. I'm sorry for messing with you. He told me to do it. Just please stop. Naruto realized how hard he was breathing as he stood up and stumbled on his feet. He looked down at the cowering, sniveling mess that once tormented him. He looked back at the other two clutching their ribs and trying to alleviate the pain. The blonde fox touched his bicep and cheek. Seeing the cuts the tiger left on him were already closing up after drawing quite a bit of blood. And of course, there was a crowd that had been watching him, now looking at him in fright as they gave him a wide bubble. He slowly stepped forward, the crowd of people parting around him as he reached the table Adam was still eating at him. Naruto stood across the table from one of the White Fang leaders, the Red Bull not looking up to address or even see the glare the fox was giving him. Naruto took a sharp breath through his nose before grabbing the mask he left on the table and walking over out of the cafeteria. He didn't like the White Fang. That didn't matter. He couldn't go back. That didn't matter either. They were scared of him. Who cares? He was here for one reason, and one reason only. So if he had to turn into a monster in order to protect her from Danzo and the others, he lashed his mask over his face and continued down the hall. Then so be it. Hunting. They looked at their partners in surprise after hearing about their past. When they said they would tell them everything about how they got here, she was surprised to learn so much. The old man that knew Naruto's mother, the same Red Bull Sasuke met 5 years ago, being such an influential member of the White Fang. Now here they were huddled together on the center carpet of the room as they told them everything. Tenten saw Naruto and Sasuke were waiting for some kind of reaction from the partners. She realized just how quiet they had been since they stopped and looked over at their leader. You really wanted to protect your mom? Of course I did. The blonde solemnly nodded. I still thought I could save her from it. And you? Kiba looked at Sasuke. It sounded pretty nice being with your brother and those guys back then. I can promise it didn't last long. So, Tenten found her curiosity getting the better of her. What happened next? Wait, Sasuke stopped the storytelling before he could go any further and stood up from the floor. He walked over to the door and opened it to reveal Ruby and Juniper hanging by their door. The two teens quickly realized they could no longer hide and listen so they jumped back. The two leaders attempted to appear normal before caught eavesdropping. Hey guys, Ruby greeted them. We were gonna come see if you wanted to get breakfast before the assembly, but you seemed busy and we listened to what you guys were saying, John blabbed, and several looks of betrayal focused on him. I'm sorry, but this seemed way too important. Do you guys want to hear the rest? Their fellow teams looked between each other before filling into Noctic's room and taking seats either in the beds or on the floor. Nora bounced on Kiba's bed. When's the good part? Not a lot of good parts, but what happens next is what brought everything down. End of chapter 43.